"Do not call security," Lena Williams said, planting herself between the trembling old man and the uniformed guards. "Call the fire department, because the man you are about to throw into the snow just saved 37 people in this building." The marble lobby of Meridian Tower fell silent. Beyond the glass doors, a January storm buried downtown Chicago beneath a curtain of white. Wind pressed against the windows like an angry sea. Red emergency lights flashed across the polished floor, painting every frightened face in brief strokes of crimson. A few feet behind Lena stood Walter Hayes, 67 years old, soaked to the knees, wearing a coat too thin for the weather. His white hair clung to his forehead. One hand rested against the wall because his legs had begun to shake. Only an hour earlier, he had been sleeping beside the service entrance with everything he owned inside a faded canvas bag. Now 3 elevators were stalled between floors. Smoke had filled a mechanical corridor. The backup power system had nearly failed, and the wealthy executives gathered for a private dinner upstairs were alive because the homeless veteran everyone had walked past knew something about the building that no one else remembered. But Dennis Cole, the director of operations, did not look grateful. He looked furious. "You brought him inside," Dennis said to Lena. "You violated building policy. You endangered everyone here." Lena lifted her chin. "No," she replied. "Leaving him outside would have endangered a human life." The head of security took one uncertain step forward. Walter looked at Lena and spoke quietly. "Do not lose your job because of me." Lena turned toward him. Her face was tired, but her voice did not waver. "A job can be replaced," she said. "A conscience cannot." No one in the lobby knew that those words would change Meridian Tower forever, and no one knew how much it had already cost Lena Williams to live by them. Lena was 41 years old and had worked the night shift at Meridian Tower for 6 years. She arrived each evening at 5:30, carrying her lunch in a brown paper bag and wearing white walking shoes she cleaned every Sunday after church. Her uniform was navy blue, plain and practical, with her name stitched above the left pocket. She lived with her 13-year-old son, Caleb, in a 2-bedroom apartment on the south side. The building was old, the radiators complained through winter, and the kitchen window faced a brick wall. But Lena kept the place warm with little things. A yellow lamp beside the couch, a pot of basil growing in a chipped blue cup, photographs arranged carefully along the hallway, and a wooden sign above the kitchen table that read, "Kindness is never wasted." The sign had belonged to Lena's mother, Beatrice, who had spent 32 years working in the laundry room of a nursing home. Beatrice never had much money. She never owned a car newer than 10 years old. She never traveled farther than Tennessee. But she remembered every birthday on her street. She carried groceries for older neighbors. She kept spare blankets in the trunk during winter. And whenever Lena complained that people took advantage of her, Beatrice would smile and say, "Baby, kindness is not a bargain. You do not give it because someone earned it. You give it because you know what cold feels like." Lena had not fully understood those words until she lost her husband. Daniel Williams had been a city bus mechanic with broad hands and an easy laugh. He could repair almost anything except the illness that took him 7 years earlier. After he passed away, Lena found herself alone with a 6-year-old boy, a stack of bills, and a silence in the apartment that seemed to grow louder after dark. For several months, she moved through life like a person walking underwater. She woke Caleb for school. She packed his lunch. She took 2 buses to work. She smiled when people spoke to her. Then she came home and cried in the bathroom with the faucet running so her son would not hear. One night, Caleb found her sitting on the kitchen floor with Daniel's old work jacket in her lap. He sat beside her without saying anything. After a while, he placed his small hand over hers. "Daddy always helped people," he whispered. "We can keep doing that for him." Lena never forgot those words. She did not know whether a 6-year-old boy fully understood what he was saying, but she knew truth when she heard it. From that day forward, she tried to build their life around what remained instead of what had been taken. It was not easy. There were months when the electric bill waited until payday. There were winters when Caleb's coat came from the church donation room. There were nights when Lena worked overtime and still counted coins before buying milk, yet their home never became bitter. Lena would not allow grief to harden them. By the time Caleb turned 13, he had grown tall and thoughtful, with Daniel's patient eyes. He loved science, old radios, and basketball. Although he was not especially good at basketball, he spent Saturdays at the public library teaching himself basic electronics from books that smelled like dust. Most things are not really broken, he told his mother once while repairing a lamp. They just need someone to find where the connection was lost. Lena smiled when he said it. She would remember those words later. Meridian Tower stood 42 stories above the Chicago River, its dark glass reflecting the city like a wall of frozen water. Law firms occupied the upper floors. A financial company rented 12 through 20. The 38th floor held a private club where executives ate beneath crystal lights while looking down on traffic that seemed small enough to hold in one hand. During the day, the lobby was filled with polished shoes, expensive coats, and quick footsteps. At night, the building belonged to people most visitors never noticed. Cleaning crews, security guards, maintenance workers, delivery drivers. Lena knew all of them. She knew that Mr. Alvarez on the engineering team drank tea instead of coffee because his heart doctor had warned him about caffeine. She knew that Denise at the front desk called her mother every evening at 8. She knew that Raymond, the oldest security guard, hid crackers in his desk because his blood sugar sometimes dropped after midnight. She remembered birthdays. She brought soup when someone was sick. She listened when people needed to talk. Her supervisor, Marcia Bell, often said Lena would have made a fine nurse, teacher, or counselor. Lena always laughed. "I am doing useful work right here," she would say. She meant it. Lena did not believe dignity depended on a title. A clean restroom mattered to the person who needed it. A safe hallway mattered to the worker walking home late. A kind word mattered to the person who had received none all day. She approached every task with the same quiet care. That was why she noticed Walter Hayes long before anyone else did. He first appeared behind Meridian Tower in early November. The loading dock faced a narrow service street where delivery trucks came before dawn. Steam rose from metal grates. The alley smelled of wet concrete, diesel, and bread from a bakery 2 blocks away. Lena was taking out a bag of trash when she saw an older man sitting beneath the service awning. He wore a green military-style coat, faded at the shoulders. A canvas bag rested beside his boots. He was not asking for money. He was studying the building. Not looking at it, studying it. His eyes moved from the ventilation grates to the electrical boxes, then upward toward the rows of dark windows. When Lena stepped outside, he rose immediately. "I will move," he said. His voice was low and careful. Lena looked at the temperature displayed on the bank sign across the street. 34 degrees. "You do not have to move because of me," she said. "This is private property." "The sidewalk is not." He nodded once, as though she had made a legal argument he respected. Lena held out a paper cup. "I brought too much coffee." The old man looked at the cup but did not take it. "I do not accept things people need. I have another one inside." That was not true. Walter seemed to know it. Still, after a moment, he accepted the coffee with both hands. "Thank you," he said. "What is your name?" "Walter." "I am Lena." He glanced at the embroidered name on her uniform. "I know." She smiled. "Then we are even." For the next several nights, Walter remained near the service entrance. Sometimes he disappeared for a day or two, then returned with the same canvas bag and the same alert, observant expression. Lena began leaving food beside the rear door. A turkey sandwich, a container of soup, an apple and 2 boiled eggs. She never handed it to him in front of other people. She understood that pride could be the last coat a person owned. Walter always returned the containers washed. Once, he left a note written in neat block letters. "The hinge on the west service door is failing. It will not close properly when the temperature drops below freezing." Lena tested the door. He was right. She told maintenance. They replaced the hinge 2 days later. A week afterward, another note appeared. "The basement vent near the generator room is partially blocked. It may cause trouble during heavy snow." Again, Walter was right. Lena became curious. One evening, she found him examining a utility panel through the loading dock window. "You know buildings," she said. Walter stepped back. "A little." That did not look like a little. He adjusted the strap of his bag. "I worked around systems for many years." "What kind of systems?" "The kind people forget until they stop working." It was the longest answer he had ever given her. Lena leaned against the wall. "Were you an electrician?" "Sometimes." "Engineer?" His eyes shifted toward the street. "Once." Lena understood that the conversation had reached a closed door. She did not push. Instead, she held out a foil-wrapped plate. Chicken, rice, and green beans. Walter accepted it. "You should save this for your family. My son refuses to eat green beans." "Then your son is making a tactical mistake." Lena laughed. It was the first time Walter smiled. Over the following weeks, their conversations grew slowly. Walter told her he had served in the army many years ago. He did not speak of medals or rank. He spoke about rebuilding schools, setting up water systems, and teaching young soldiers how to respect equipment. "A machine will tell you what is wrong," he said one night, "but you have to be quiet long enough to hear it." He asked about Caleb. Lena told him her son loved electronics. Walter reached into his bag and produced a small brass screwdriver with a worn wooden handle. "This was part of a field repair kit," he said. "It is not valuable, but it is balanced well. I cannot take that." "It is not for you." Lena raised an eyebrow. "For Caleb? If he respects tools." "He does. Then give it to him." Caleb treated the screwdriver like a family treasure. He turned it over beneath the kitchen light, studying the initials carved into the handle. "W.H. "Who is Walter?" he asked. "A man who knows how to fix things." "Does he work at the building?" "Not anymore." Caleb looked at his mother. "Where does he live?" Lena hesitated. "He does not have a permanent place right now." Caleb's expression changed. Not to pity. Lena was proud of that. It changed to concern. "Can he stay here?" Their apartment had barely enough room for 2 people. The lease prohibited guests longer than 3 nights. Lena did not know Walter well enough to bring him into her home. Still, her son's question touched her. "We cannot solve every problem by ourselves," she said, "but we can refuse to become people who look away." Caleb nodded slowly. The next evening, he packed an extra oatmeal cookie in Lena's lunch bag. "That one is not for you," he said. "For Walter? If he respects cookies." Lena laughed all the way to the bus stop. December arrived with hard wind and early darkness. Meridian Tower decorated its lobby with a 20-foot tree covered in gold lights. A grand piano appeared near the elevators. Each morning, fresh flowers were placed on the reception desk. People walked through the revolving doors carrying shopping bags, wrapped gifts, and boxes of expensive sweets. Outside the service entrance, Walter slept beneath 2 blankets. Lena contacted a veterans outreach program. A caseworker came twice, but Walter was gone both times. When Lena asked why he avoided help, he gave no clear answer. "I have been entered into enough systems," he said. "Some systems help, some do. You served this country. That does not make me more deserving than anyone else in the cold." "No," Lena replied, "but it means you should not be afraid to accept a bed." Walter's face tightened. "I am not afraid of a bed." Lena waited. He looked away. "Sometimes walls are harder than weather," he said. She did not understand then. Later she would. On Christmas Eve, Meridian Tower closed early. By 7, most offices were dark. Lena found Walter sitting behind the building with his back against the brick wall. Snow rested on his shoulders. She handed him a red gift bag. He frowned. "I did not agree to gifts." "It is not a gift. It is a practical exchange." "For what?" "For giving my son a screwdriver that he has shown to every person on our block." Walter opened the bag. Inside was a thick gray scarf, a pair of insulated gloves, and a small battery-powered radio Caleb had repaired. A note was taped to the radio. "Mr. Hayes, the left dial sticks, but the signal is strong. Thank you for trusting me with your tool. "Merry Christmas, Caleb." Walter read the note twice. His hands remained still for a long time. Then he turned away from Lena. She pretended not to notice him wiping his eyes. "Your son has good handwriting," he said. "He does not." "No," Walter admitted, "but he has a good heart." Lena sat beside him under the awning. For several minutes they listened to the little radio play an old Christmas song. Finally, Walter spoke. "My wife liked this one. What was her name?" "Margaret." "Was?" Walter looked toward the falling snow. "She passed 6 years ago." "I am sorry." "So am I." There was no bitterness in the answer, only a sorrow so old it had learned to sit quietly. "Were you married long?" Lena asked. 38 years. That is a lifetime. Not when it ends. Lena understood that. She told him about Daniel. She told him how grief could make a familiar room feel like a place you had entered by mistake. She told him how she had once kept Daniel's work boots beside the back door for nearly a year, because moving them felt like admitting he would not return. Walter listened without interruption. When she finished, he said, "Margaret's coffee cup stayed beside the sink for 14 months. The two of them sat beneath the service awning while the city celebrated behind warm windows. They did not offer one another easy comfort. They simply shared the truth. Sometimes that is the deepest comfort one person can give another. In January, the temperature dropped sharply. Weather reports warned of a major storm moving across Illinois. Schools closed early. Airlines canceled flights. City officials urged people to remain indoors. But Meridian Tower remained open. The executive board of North River Financial had scheduled its annual leadership dinner on the 38th floor. Senior partners had flown in from Boston, Atlanta, Denver, and New York. The company had paid thousands of dollars for food, flowers, transportation, and security. Dennis Cole, the director of building operations, sent an email reminding all staff that professional standards must be maintained despite the weather. Dennis was 52, tall, sharply dressed, and always in a hurry. He had managed Meridian Tower for 4 years. Under his leadership, the lobby had been renovated, security scanners upgraded, and cleaning schedules tightened. He liked reports, polished surfaces, and measurable results. He did not like surprises. He also did not like Walter. 2 weeks earlier, Dennis had seen him near the loading dock and ordered security to remove him. "This is not a shelter," he told Lena afterward. He was not inside the building. He was near the entrance. It was snowing. Dennis had looked at her as if weather were irrelevant to policy. "There are facilities for people like him. Facilities are full. That is not our responsibility." Lena remembered her mother's words. Kindness is not a bargain. She also remembered the rent due on the 1st of every month. So she lowered her eyes and returned to work. But she did not stop bringing Walter food. On the afternoon of the storm, Caleb's school dismissed students at noon. Lena considered calling off work, but the building required a full cleaning crew because of the board dinner. Missing the shift would mean losing nearly $150. That money covered groceries for more than a week. Caleb insisted he would be fine. "I am 13, Mom. You are 13 when it helps you, and 12 when dishes need washing. I can be both." Lena left him with soup in the refrigerator, 2 emergency phone numbers, and strict instructions not to open the door. Before she departed, Caleb handed her the small radio. "For Walter," he said. "The weather station said the temperature will feel like 20 below tonight." Lena looked out the window. Snow had already begun drifting across the street. "I will make sure he has it." The bus ride downtown took almost 2 hours. By the time Lena arrived, the city had vanished behind white wind. Taxis moved slowly. People leaned forward as they walked, protecting their faces. Inside Meridian Tower, everything glowed. Candles burned on linen-covered tables upstairs. A string quartet played near the private club entrance. Waiters carried silver trays through warm rooms. Lena and the cleaning crew moved quietly behind the event, emptying bins, polishing mirrors, and keeping hallways clear. At 6:40, she went to the loading dock. Walter was there. He stood beneath the narrow awning, but the wind had changed direction. Snow covered his coat and hat. His face looked pale. "You cannot stay here tonight," Lena said. Walter attempted a smile. "I have experienced worse. That does not make this safe. The shelters will be full. I called one on Harrison Street. They added emergency beds. I went there. And no space." Lena looked at his boots. The leather was soaked. "Come inside for 10 minutes. "No, Walter. If Dennis sees me, you will lose your job. You need to warm up. I will keep moving." He took one step and stumbled. Lena caught his arm. Beneath the wet coat, he felt frighteningly thin. "Enough," she said. She guided him through the service door. Walter resisted only once. "Lena, this is not wise. Neither is freezing to prove you can survive it." The basement level contained storage rooms, maintenance corridors, laundry supplies, and mechanical equipment. Few executives ever came below the lobby. Lena led Walter to a small custodial room near the west stairwell. It held shelves of paper products, an old desk, and a chair with a cracked vinyl seat. Heat from nearby pipes made it warmer than the loading dock. "You can sit here until the storm eases," she said. Walter removed his wet coat. Lena brought towels, hot tea, and a bowl of soup from the staff break room. He looked at the food. "I cannot repay you. You gave my son a screwdriver. That was an old tool. He thinks it belonged to George Washington." Walter almost smiled. Lena placed the radio on the desk. "Caleb sent this." Walter touched the top of it gently. Then he looked at Lena. "You have a rare boy. He had a good father. He has a good mother." Lena turned away before the words reached too deeply. "I need to finish the 37th floor. Stay here. Do not wander." "Yes, ma'am." "And if anyone asks, you are waiting for transportation. To where?" "To someplace warm." Walter nodded. Lena left the room and closed the door. For the next 40 minutes, everything appeared normal. The executive dinner began. Wine was poured. Speeches were delivered. A senior partner told a story about the company's first office, when 5 employees worked above a hardware store and shared one telephone. In the basement, Walter listened to weather updates on Caleb's radio. At 7:32, the lights flickered. Only once. Most people did not notice. Walter did. He lifted his head. The radio signal crackled for half a second. A low vibration passed through the wall. Walter placed his palm against the heating pipe. Then he stood. Upstairs, Lena was replacing towels in a private restroom when the lights flickered again. This time, the string quartet stopped playing. The main lights returned, but several recessed lamps remained dark. A moment later, an alarm sounded. Not the fire alarm, a mechanical warning. Lena stepped into the hallway. 2 waiters stood frozen beside a cart. "What is that?" one asked. Before Lena could answer, the building shuddered. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the 38th floor. Someone screamed. Emergency lamps came on several seconds later, casting a dim red glow across the corridor. Phones lit up. Guests began talking at once. "Please remain calm," a security officer called. "The backup generator will restore full power." But it did not. The air conditioning system stopped. The elevators did not respond. On the basement level, Walter opened the custodial room door. The mechanical warning continued in short bursts. He walked toward the generator corridor, listening. A maintenance technician named Luis Alvarez came running around the corner. When he saw Walter, he stopped. "What are you doing down here?" "What failed?" Walter asked. "Who are you?" "The main lights dropped, but emergency power is incomplete. Did the generator start?" "It started. Then the transfer did not complete." Luis stared at him. "How do you know that?" "The sound." Another alarm began. Walter's expression changed. "Is the west intake still below street level?" Luis frowned. "What?" "The west generator intake. Is it still below street level?" "I do not know." "Then snow may be blocking airflow." Luis stepped closer. "You need to leave this area." Walter looked toward the steel door at the end of the hall. "Listen to me. The generator is running under load, but the cooling intake is restricted. If the automatic transfer switch keeps cycling, You may lose emergency power entirely. Luis hesitated. The lights flickered again. Then went dark for 3 full seconds. When they returned, Walter said, "You have minutes, not hours." Luis used his radio. "Control, this is Alvarez in lower mechanical. We may have an intake blockage and transfer failure. Send engineering to the west generator room." Static answered. Then the voice of the chief engineer. "Already checking. Panel shows irregular load." Walter approached the door. "The panel will not show the mechanical bypass." Luis blocked him. "You cannot go in there. I helped design it." The words hung between them. "What did you say?" Walter looked at the steel door, where faded letters read Auxiliary Power Room B. "I said I know this system." Luis studied him. Behind the tired face and worn clothes, he saw something that made him move aside. Not authority, certainty. They entered the corridor together. A sharp electrical odor filled the air. Water had seeped beneath an exterior vent where wind-driven snow melted against warm metal. The floor was wet near a bank of cabinets. Walter stopped several feet away. "Do not touch that panel!" Luis had already reached toward it. He pulled his hand back. Walter pointed to an older metal housing partly concealed behind newer equipment. "The original manual crossfeed is there. That cabinet has been inactive for years." "No, it was never inactive. It was sealed behind the upgrade." Luis stared at the housing. "How can you know that?" "Because I argued for 3 months to keep it." Another technician arrived, followed by Dennis Cole. Dennis took one look at Walter and his face hardened. "What is he doing inside the building?" Lena came down the stairwell at the same moment. She had heard radio traffic and hurried toward the basement. Dennis turned to her. "You brought him in. The storm is dangerous. I gave a direct instruction. The power is failing." Lena said, "This is not the time." "It is exactly the time. Security is already dealing with trapped elevators, and now we have an unauthorized person in a restricted area." Walter spoke calmly. "The automatic transfer switch is cycling because the generator load is unstable. Snow has restricted the west intake, and moisture may have entered the relay cabinet." Dennis looked at him with disbelief. "You need to leave. The emergency batteries will not hold the elevator ventilation systems for long." Dennis turned to Luis. "Remove him." Luis did not move. "He may be right." Dennis's voice sharpened. "You are taking technical advice from a man who sleeps behind the building?" Walter looked at Dennis. "A failing system does not care where a man sleeps." The lights went out again. This time, they did not return. The basement became completely dark. Someone cursed softly. Walter's voice remained steady. "Nobody move. There is water near the cabinet." Emergency flashlights came on. Over the radio, security reported that 3 elevators were stalled. One contained 14 people from the executive dinner. Another held 6 catering workers. The third carried a pregnant attorney, her husband, and 9 other guests. The fire department had been called, but road conditions were slowing response. The temperature inside the elevator shafts had begun to rise. Dennis looked at the dark corridor. "What do we do?" Walter answered immediately. "First, shut down the automatic cycling before it damages the generator. Second, clear the west intake. Third, open the original manual crossfeed and isolate the wet cabinet." Luis stared at the old metal housing. "We do not have documentation for that system." "I do." "Where?" "In my head." Dennis shook his head. "No. We wait for the fire department and the utility company." Walter stepped toward him. "If you wait, the generator may shut down to protect itself. Then the emergency ventilation will stop. The elevators will remain locked, the stairwell pressure system will fail, and every dark floor will become harder to evacuate. You cannot guarantee that." "No," Walter said, "but the building is already telling us what is happening." Lena watched the 2 men. One wore a tailored suit and held a tablet full of building reports. The other wore wet boots and carried everything he owned in a canvas bag. Only one of them understood the sound coming from behind the wall. Dennis raised his radio. "Security, come to lower mechanical. Remove the unauthorized individual." Lena stepped between him and Walter. "Before you do that, Let him show Luis the system. This is not your decision. No, but the lives upstairs are not your reputation. Dennis stared at her. You are suspended, effective immediately. The words struck with the force of a physical blow. Lena saw the rent notice on her kitchen counter. She saw Caleb's school shoes, worn at the soles. She saw the grocery list held to the refrigerator with a magnet. For one terrible second, fear almost silenced her. Then the radio crackled. A woman was having difficulty breathing inside elevator 3. Walter looked toward the sound. Lena, he said quietly, you should step away. She did not. Do what you know how to do, she told him. Walter turned to Luis. Find the mechanical override key. It should be in a red box near the north wall. Luis hurried across the room. There was no red box. Walter moved his flashlight over the wall, revealing a newer sheet of metal. They covered it during renovation, he said. Luis found a screwdriver and removed the plate. Behind it sat an old red box, dusty but intact. Inside was a long steel key. Luis looked at Walter with astonishment. Walter pointed to 3 switches inside the original cabinet. Top left isolates the automatic transfer. Center controls the manual crossfeed. Bottom right energizes elevator ventilation only. How do we know the wiring has not changed? We test continuity before moving anything. Luis connected a meter. The readings matched Walter's instructions. Dennis said nothing. Outside, 2 maintenance workers fought through deepening snow to clear the blocked intake. Wind pushed them backward. Ice had formed across the lower grate. Inside, Walter guided Luis through each step. His hands trembled, but his voice did not. Slowly, systems fail faster when people hurry. The automatic cycling stopped. The generator settled into a lower, steadier rhythm. Luis engaged the manual crossfeed. Emergency lighting returned to the basement, then to several upper floors. A cheer rose over the security radio. Ventilation restored in elevators 2 and 3. Walter closed his eyes briefly. One is still without power, he said. Luis checked the panel. Elevator 1 is not responding. Walter looked toward the ceiling. Which car? The North Express. That shaft was altered in the 2008 modernization. Dennis finally spoke. How would you know? Walter did not answer. He asked Luis for the building diagram. The current digital plan showed the express elevator feed on the east side. Walter shook his head. That is wrong. This is the official plan, Dennis said. The drawing was updated without changing the original conduit. You cannot know that. Walter pointed to a maintenance note barely visible on the screen. See that designation? NEC 4. North Express Conduit 4. The line is mislabeled, but the notation remained. Luis enlarged the image. Walter was right. If power is sent through the mapped line, Walter continued, you will energize an empty service channel. The elevator feed is behind the old fire pump wall. Dennis looked at the technicians. Verify it. They did. Again, Walter was right. By the time firefighters reached Meridian Tower, emergency ventilation had been restored, and accurate system information was waiting for them. Walter did not attempt the elevator rescue himself. He did something more useful. He stood beside the fire captain and explained the original shaft layout, the manual circuits, and the safest route to the stalled cars. The firefighters used specialized equipment to secure each elevator and open controlled exit points. The first passengers emerged after 22 minutes. The catering workers came next. The last car held 14 executives from the 38th floor, including Eleanor Grant, the 72-year-old chairwoman of North River Financial. Eleanor stepped into the lobby wrapped in a gray emergency blanket. Her silver hair had come loose from its careful style. She looked shaken but composed. Firefighters led the other passengers toward chairs. The pregnant attorney was examined by paramedics and found to be safe. No one had suffered a serious injury. 37 people had been trapped in the 3 elevators. All 37 came out safely. Walter stood near the service corridor, trying to leave before anyone noticed him. That was when the security guards arrived. Dennis pointed toward him. Escort that man outside. Lena stepped forward. The lobby fell quiet. Do not call security. she said. Call the fire department, because the man you are about to throw into the snow just saved 37 people in this building. And now, standing beneath the red emergency lights, she faced the cost of everything she had done. Dennis's jaw tightened. He entered restricted mechanical areas without authorization. He entered because the system was failing. He was brought into the building illegally. Illegally? Lena repeated. He was freezing. Building policy is clear. So is right and wrong. Several people turned toward them. Dennis lowered his voice. You are a custodian, Lena. You do not make operational decisions. She looked at him steadily. Tonight, the people who made the decisions needed help from the man they would not let through the door. A murmur moved through the lobby. Walter touched Lena's shoulder. That is enough. No, she said. It is not. Eleanor Grant had been listening. She approached slowly, still holding the emergency blanket around her shoulders. Who is this man? She asked. Dennis answered first. An individual who has been sleeping near the loading dock. Ms. Williams brought him inside against direct instruction. Eleanor looked at Walter. What is your name? He hesitated. Walter Hayes. Something changed in Eleanor's face. Hayes? Yes, ma'am. She studied him more closely. Were you ever associated with McCall Engineering? Walter's eyes narrowed slightly. A long time ago. Eleanor looked toward the mechanical corridor. My father used McCall Engineering when this tower was renovated in 1989. Walter nodded. I know. How? Walter's answer was simple. I drew part of it. Luis Alvarez came forward. He knew the original backup system, Mrs. Grant. He knew about a manual crossfeed that was not in our current documentation. Without that information, we would have lost more time. The fire captain joined them. He also identified an error in the elevator conduit plan. That saved us from searching the wrong service channel. Eleanor looked at Walter again. Why is your name familiar to me? Walter lowered his eyes. It probably should not be. Before Eleanor could ask another question, paramedics insisted that she sit down. Dennis ordered security to keep Walter in the lobby until police arrived. The fire captain objected. This man is not a threat, Dennis replied. That determination is not yours to make. Walter raised one hand. It is all right. Lena looked at him. No, it is not. It is tonight. He sat quietly in a lobby chair while snow continued to strike the glass. Police officers arrived, spoke with witnesses, and reviewed security footage. They found no evidence that Walter had stolen, damaged, or threatened anything. The fire captain explained his role in the emergency. No arrest was made. But Dennis gave Lena a formal suspension notice before she left. She was not permitted to return until an internal review had been completed. Her building access card was taken. Her name badge remained on her uniform as she walked through the revolving doors. Walter followed her outside. The storm had weakened, but snow covered the sidewalks in deep, uneven drifts. A police officer offered to drive Walter to an emergency warming center. This time, he accepted. Before getting into the vehicle, he turned to Lena. I am sorry. For what? You lost your job. I was suspended. You know what he intends. Lena did know. Still, she said, the review is not finished. Walter looked toward Meridian Tower. Men like Dennis do not conduct reviews. They arrange conclusions. Lena pulled her coat tighter. Then we will make the truth inconvenient. Walter gave a tired smile. You sound like Margaret. Your wife? She never knew how to leave a wrong thing alone. I would have liked her. She would have loved you. The officer opened the car door. Walter paused. Tell Caleb the radio worked. You can tell him yourself. Walter looked away. Then he entered the vehicle. Lena watched the car disappear into the snowy street. The bus ride home took nearly 3 hours. She arrived after midnight. Caleb was awake at the kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks he had not been reading. The moment Lena entered, he stood. What happened? She removed her wet coat slowly. There was a power failure. Are you okay? I am fine. Walter? He is safe. Caleb studied her face. What else? Lena placed the suspension notice on the table. Caleb read it. His shoulders dropped. You got fired because of him? No, but you brought him inside. I brought him inside because leaving him in that weather could have harmed him. Caleb sat down. For a moment, Lena worried he would be angry. Instead, he asked, "Would you do it again?" She looked at her son. There were times when parents taught children through words. There were other times when children asked whether those words were true. "Yes," Lena said, "I would." Caleb nodded. "Then we will be okay." She sat beside him. "We may have to cut expenses for a while. I can stop basketball." "No, I am not very good anyway. That has never stopped you before." He smiled faintly. Lena reached across the table and took his hand. "We will not panic tonight. What will we do? Tomorrow we will make a list. A list of what? What we know, what we need, who we can call." Caleb looked toward the wooden sign above the table. "Kindness is never wasted." "Mom?" "Yes? Was Grandma ever wrong?" "Frequently." "About that sign?" Lena followed his eyes. "No," she said, "not about that." The next morning, news of the Meridian Tower outage appeared on local television. The report praised firefighters and building engineers for evacuating 3 stalled elevators during the storm. Walter was not mentioned. Neither was Lena. North River Financial released a statement saying its safety systems had functioned as designed. Lena read the sentence 3 times. Then she laughed without humor. Caleb looked up from his cereal. "What?" "The safety systems did not function as designed. Maybe they mean Walter was part of the design." "No, they mean they want people to stop asking questions." At 10 o'clock, Marcia Bell called. Lena's supervisor sounded upset. "Dennis says you knowingly admitted an unauthorized person into a secure area." "I admitted an older man into a storage room during dangerous weather. He says you let him access mechanical equipment. He went there after the power failed." "I know. Luis told me everything." "Is Luis supporting me?" There was a pause. "He has been told not to discuss the incident." "What about the security footage?" "Under review." "Who is reviewing it?" "Dennis." Lena closed her eyes. Marcia lowered her voice. "Listen to me. Eleanor Grant asked for a full report. That may help. Dennis will write the report. Not if she keeps asking questions. Will she? I do not know." After the call, Lena contacted the union representative who occasionally assisted contract workers. Because the cleaning staff technically worked for an outside company, their protections were limited. She was advised to write a complete statement while details remained fresh. Caleb opened his laptop. "I will type." For 2 hours, Lena described everything. The weather warning, Walter's condition, the storage room, the first power flicker, the generator failure, the trapped elevators, Dennis's order, Walter's instructions. Every detail went into the statement. At the end, Caleb asked, "Should we say Walter designed the building?" "Part of the system. We do not know exactly what." "We should find out." "How?" "The internet." Walter Hayes was a common name. Their first searches produced retired teachers, real estate agents, a jazz musician, and several obituaries. Then Caleb added McCall Engineering in Chicago. A scanned trade journal from 1990 appeared in an online archive. The article described the Meridian Tower Safety Modernization Project. The chief engineer listed was Grant McCall, founder of McCall Engineering Associates. Beneath a photograph of the project team stood 6 men in suits. Caleb enlarged the image. One man in the back row was younger, clean-shaven, and standing slightly apart from the others. But the eyes were the same. "That is him," Caleb said. Lena leaned closer. The caption named 5 people. The 6th man was not identified. Walter. They searched again. Another document appeared. This one from a professional engineering conference. A presentation titled "Redundant Power Systems in High-Rise Emergency Design" had been delivered by Grant McCall and Walter J. Hayes. A summary credited Hayes with developing a manual crossfeed that allowed essential building systems to remain active when automatic controls failed. Caleb stared at the screen. "That is what he used." Yes. Why was it missing from the new plans? Lena did not answer. The next result was a brief newspaper report from 1994. Engineer leaves firm following dispute over safety certification. The article stated that Walter Hayes had resigned from McCall Engineering after refusing to approve a public building project he believed did not meet emergency standards. McCall Engineering denied wrongdoing. No charges were filed. Walter's career seemed to vanish after that. There were no awards, no company profiles, no interviews. Only silence. "Mom," Caleb said, "they erased him." Maybe. Why? Because sometimes the truth makes powerful people uncomfortable. Can they do that? They can try. By afternoon, Lena had called 3 warming centers, 2 veterans organizations, and the police district that had transported Walter. He had been taken to an emergency shelter near Harrison Street. But when Lena called, the staff said he had left that morning. He had signed no intake forms. He had given no forwarding information. For 2 days, Lena searched. She visited the service entrance at Meridian Tower, but Walter did not return. Security would not let her inside. She checked the library, Union Station, and 2 church meal programs. No one had seen him. Meanwhile, Dennis sent a final termination notice through the cleaning company. The letter stated that Lena had shown serious disregard for safety protocols, brought an unauthorized individual into a restricted property, and challenged management during an active emergency. There was no mention of Walter's role, no mention of the restored power, no mention of the 37 people who had left the elevators safely. Lena read the letter at the kitchen table. Caleb stood beside her. "Can they do this?" They did. "What do we do now?" Lena folded the letter carefully. "We keep going." She applied for jobs at hospitals, hotels, schools, and office buildings. Her 6 years of excellent performance helped, but the reason for her termination created questions. One manager asked, "Would you say you have difficulty following authority?" Lena replied, "Only when authority asks me to ignore someone in danger." She did not receive that job. Another interviewer praised her compassion, but said the company required employees who respected boundaries. Lena returned home with bus fare in her pocket, and shame pressing against her ribs. Caleb found her standing in the kitchen, still wearing her coat. He did not ask how the interview went. He simply warmed soup and placed a bowl in front of her. For the first time since the storm, Lena began to doubt herself. Not the decision to bring Walter inside. She could not regret that. But she wondered whether courage had become easier because Caleb paid part of the price. The rent was due in 9 days. Their savings would cover 1 month. After that, she did not know. "I should have been more careful," she said. Caleb sat across from her. "You saved Walter. Walter saved everyone else. You helped him be there. That does not pay rent." "No," Caleb said, "but it still matters." Lena looked at him. He was 13, trying to be brave because she was tired. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I am the mother," she said. "You do not have to carry this." "I know." "Then stop looking at me like you are responsible for making me feel better." "I am not. You are." Caleb considered this. "Maybe we are both carrying it." Lena smiled despite herself. "You sound 40. I have always been mature. You left wet towels on the bathroom floor this morning. Maturity is complicated." The following afternoon, someone knocked on the apartment door. Lena opened it to find Luis Alvarez standing in the hallway. He wore his work jacket and held a thick envelope. "I hope this is not a bad time. Come in." Luis sat at the kitchen table while Lena made coffee. Caleb remained in his room, although the door stayed slightly open. Luis looked exhausted. "I should have spoken sooner. You were protecting your job." "That is what I told myself." He placed the envelope on the table. Inside were printed emails, maintenance logs, and photographs of the generator room. "I copied these before Dennis restricted access." Lena looked through the pages. "What am I seeing?" Warnings. The generator intake problem was reported 3 times in December. Dennis delayed the repair because the quarter's maintenance budget had already been exceeded. Lena felt a coldness unrelated to winter. He knew. He knew snow accumulation could block the intake. And the automatic transfer switch? Scheduled for replacement in March. Why March? Cheaper contract window. Lena looked at him. Then Walter did not cause danger by entering the building. No, the danger was already there. Louise pushed another page toward her. This is the current emergency diagram. The elevator conduit is mislabeled, exactly as Walter said. Will you tell Eleanor Grant? Louise rubbed his hands together. I requested a meeting. Dennis issued me a written warning for bypassing reporting structure. Are you willing to testify? He looked toward Caleb's room. I have 2 children. Lena waited. Louise swallowed. Yes, he said. I am willing. That evening, Denise from the reception desk called. Then Raymond from security. Then one of the catering supervisors. Each had seen a different part of the incident. Each believed the official report was false. Most were frightened. But fear changes when people discover they are not alone. By the next morning, 7 employees had agreed to sign statements. One of the executives trapped in the elevator sent Lena an email. Her name was Rebecca Sloan, a regional vice president. She wrote that Walter's calm instructions over the intercom had helped passengers remain composed while firefighters worked. Rebecca had asked North River Financial why Walter was not mentioned in the company report. She received no answer. She also asked why Lena had been terminated. Again, no answer. At the bottom of the email, Rebecca added, My father was a janitor for 28 years. I learned early that the people with the least authority often know the most about what keeps a place standing. Please do not give up. Lena read the message aloud to Caleb. He smiled. The truth is becoming inconvenient. Yes, Lena said. It is. But they still had not found Walter. On the 4th day after the storm, Caleb remembered the radio. The weather station, he said. What about it? Walter listens to the same station every night. They announce warming buses and meal locations. Lena checked the station's website. A mobile outreach van was scheduled to distribute food near Union Station that evening. She and Caleb took the bus downtown. They searched beneath the station's stone arches, through crowded waiting areas, and along nearby streets. Snow had turned gray at the curbs. Cold air rushed between buildings. At last, Caleb saw the red scarf. Walter sat on a bench near a church van, drinking soup from a paper cup. Mr. Hayes! Walter looked up. When he saw them, his face filled first with surprise and then concern. You should not be here. Caleb approached him. You disappeared. I moved. Without telling us. Walter looked at Lena. I thought it would be easier. For whom? She asked. He had no answer. They sat together inside the station. Travelers moved around them carrying suitcases and coffee. Walter appeared more tired than before. His hands shook slightly. Lena told him about the termination letter, the employees' statements, and the maintenance records. His face darkened. You should let this go. Why? Because people with buildings full of lawyers can make truth expensive. They already made it expensive. Then do not pay more. This is not only about my job. It should be. No, it is about what happened. Walter looked away. Lena opened the folder and placed the old conference paper in front of him. His name appeared beside Grant McCall's. We found this, she said. Walter stared at the page. Caleb leaned forward. You invented the manual crossfeed. I helped design it. It saved everybody. It functioned as intended. No, Caleb said. You made it function. Walter folded the paper carefully. That was a long time ago. What happened? Lena asked. He remained silent. People hurried past them. A train announcement echoed through the station. Finally, Walter spoke. I was 29 when I joined McCall Engineering. Grant McCall was brilliant. He was also ambitious in ways I did not understand at first. Walter explained that Meridian Tower had been one of the firm's largest projects. The building's original emergency power system was inadequate. Walter spent months designing a redundant manual system that could preserve ventilation, stairwell pressure, and emergency communication if automatic controls failed. Grant presented the work to the client. Walter did not object. He owned the company, Walter said. I believed the work mattered more than the name attached to it. Years later, McCall Engineering won a contract to certify safety systems in a public housing complex. Walter found that cheaper components had been installed. He refused to approve them. Grant demanded his signature. Walter refused again. The dispute became public, but the company's attorneys buried the details. Walter resigned. Other firms became reluctant to hire an engineer known for challenging employers. I found contract work, Walter said, then less work, then almost none. What about your military service? Caleb asked. I served in the Army Corps before McCall. After leaving the firm, I returned as a civilian consultant for several years. So what happened later? Lena asked gently. Walter looked down at his hands. Margaret became ill. He cared for his wife through a long decline. Medical bills grew. He sold their house and moved into a smaller apartment. Their only son, Thomas, lived in Oregon and wanted Walter to move west. Walter refused. Margaret wanted to remain near her sister and her church, he said. I thought there would be time afterward. There was not. After Margaret passed, Walter withdrew from everyone. He stopped answering Thomas's calls. He missed paperwork related to his veterans' benefits. A former business partner mishandled money Walter had invested. His apartment lease ended. One loss followed another, none dramatic enough to make headlines, but together they carried him out of ordinary life. People believe homelessness begins with one terrible day, Walter said. Sometimes it is a staircase. One step, then another. By the time you look up, the door is far above you. Why did you stop talking to your son? Caleb asked. Walter's eyes filled with shame. Because he saw what I had become. That is not an answer. Lena looked at Caleb, but Walter did not appear offended. No, he said, it is not. He took a breath. My son was angry that I would not leave Chicago. He believed I chose sorrow over him. Perhaps I did. The last time we spoke, he said I cared more about the past than the living. Was he wrong? Lena asked. Walter stared at the station floor. Not entirely. Caleb touched the initials on the old screwdriver in his pocket. Do you still know his phone number? Walter nodded. Then the connection is not completely lost. The words struck Walter with visible force. Most things are not really broken. They just need someone to find where the connection was lost. Lena placed the folder in his lap. Eleanor Grant has ordered a formal hearing. She wants you there. No. Walter, I will not stand in a glass room while people discuss whether I deserve credit for something I did 35 years ago. This is not about credit. It always becomes about credit. It is about truth. Truth did not protect me the first time. Lena leaned closer. No, but hiding did not protect you either. Walter flinched. She softened her voice. I am not asking you to become a symbol. I am asking you to tell what happened. For your job? For everyone who is expected to remain silent because a powerful person wrote the report. Walter looked at the commuters moving through the station. Then he looked at Caleb. You should not have to see adults fail this often. Caleb shrugged. Then give us one better example. Walter almost laughed. After a long silence, he nodded. I will attend. Eleanor Grant scheduled the hearing for Monday morning. It was not held in the grand boardroom on the 38th floor. At her request, it took place in a plain conference room on the 6th floor, close to the building operations offices. Eleanor sat at the head of the table. Beside her were 2 board members, outside legal counsel, the fire captain, and an independent safety engineer. Dennis Cole attended with an attorney. Luis Alvarez sat near the wall. Rebecca Sloan joined by video from Boston. Marcia Bell represented the cleaning company. Lena wore a dark blue dress she had owned since Daniel's memorial service. Caleb helped press it the night before. Walter arrived in a borrowed suit from the Veterans Center. The jacket was slightly large. His old canvas bag remained at his feet. When Dennis saw him, his expression revealed nothing. Eleanor opened the meeting. We are here to determine what occurred during the January 14th power emergency, why the official reports differ from witness accounts, and whether employment actions taken afterward were justified. Dennis's attorney spoke first. He described a severe weather event that caused an unpredictable equipment malfunction. He said Walter's presence in the building created confusion. He praised management for coordinating emergency response. He stated that Lena's termination resulted solely from her violation of access policy. Then Luis testified. He explained the generator intake warnings. He presented work orders showing that repairs had been postponed. He described the transfer switch problem and Walter's accurate identification of the manual crossfeed. The independent engineer confirmed that Walter's instructions were technically sound. The fire captain testified that the corrected conduit information saved valuable time during the elevator rescue. Rebecca Sloan described what passengers heard inside the stalled elevator. "A man's voice came through the intercom," she said. "He told us ventilation had been restored and firefighters were on the way. He spoke slowly. People stopped panicking." "Did you know who he was?" Eleanor asked. "No. Later, I learned he was the man management wanted removed." Security footage played on a wall screen. It showed Lena guiding Walter into the storage room. He did not enter restricted mechanical areas until after the outage. It showed Dennis ordering security to remove him while technical alarms sounded. It showed Walter warning Luis about water near the electrical cabinet. It showed Lena standing between Walter and the guards in the lobby. The room remained silent after the video ended. Dennis shifted in his chair. "The footage does not change the fact that Miss Williams violated a direct order." Eleanor looked at him. "Your direct order would have left a 67-year-old man outdoors during a dangerous weather emergency. He could have gone to a shelter. There was no available space," Lena said. Dennis's attorney objected. Eleanor raised one hand. "This is not a courtroom. She may answer." Lena spoke calmly. "I brought Walter into a heated storage room. I gave him soup and asked him to remain there. When the power failed, he went toward the alarms because he understood them." Dennis said, "You had no basis to trust him. I had known him for months." "You knew him as a man sleeping outside. I knew him as a man who noticed a broken door hinge before our maintenance reports did. I knew him as someone who returned every food container washed. I knew he had served his country and worked as an engineer." "You did not verify any of that." Lena looked at Walter. "Sometimes a person tells you who he is by how he carries what little he has left." Dennis leaned back. Eleanor turned to Walter. "Mr. Hayes, please tell us about your work on Meridian Tower." Walter opened the old folder. He did not dramatize his story. He described circuit routes, load priorities, manual systems, and the decisions made during the 1989 renovation. He explained why the crossfeed had been designed. He explained the conduit labeling error. He explained how later renovations concealed key components without fully replacing them. The independent engineer asked detailed questions. Walter answered each one. At last, Eleanor placed an old blueprint on the table. Her staff had found it in a storage archive owned by her family. Near the lower right corner were the initials WJH. Walter touched them. "I had forgotten that sheet existed." Eleanor looked deeply troubled. "My father's files contain letters from Grant McCall insisting that all design credit be assigned to his firm. That was standard. They also contain a handwritten note from my father." She passed the note across the table. It read, "Hayes raised concern over McCall taking sole credit. McCall says Hayes is difficult and should not be included in future meetings." Walter read the line without expression. Eleanor's voice softened. "My father accepted that explanation." Walter folded the note. Most clients did. "I am sorry." He looked at her. "You were not responsible for your father's decision." "No, but I inherited the building, the company relationships, and every benefit created by people whose names were forgotten. Responsibility does not disappear simply because it began before us." Dennis interrupted. "With respect, none of this changes the access violation." Eleanor turned toward him. "You are correct." Dennis appeared surprised. She continued. "It makes the violation more revealing." She opened a maintenance report. "You delayed a documented generator repair. I followed budget priorities. You issued a public statement, claiming the system functioned as designed. The essential outcome was successful, because Mr. Hayes intervened, because our team responded. Your team asked him to leave. Dennis's face reddened. Eleanor closed the folder. You also conducted the internal review of Miss Williams after she directly challenged your actions. I followed company procedure. No, Eleanor said. You used procedure to protect yourself from accountability. The room became completely still. Eleanor announced that Dennis Cole was being placed on administrative leave pending a broader investigation. His authority over Lena's employment review was removed. The termination notice was rescinded. Lena would receive back pay for every missed shift. Marcia Bell smiled quietly. Caleb, waiting outside the conference room with a Veterans Center volunteer, would later say he knew the outcome was good, because his mother came through the door, crying and laughing at the same time. But the hearing was not finished. Eleanor turned to Walter. North River Financial would like to compensate you for emergency consulting and formally recognize your contribution to Meridian Tower's safety design. Walter sat very still. We also want to offer you a position advising the independent review of this building's emergency systems. Walter looked at the blueprint. I do not need a plaque. I did not offer one. You were going to. Eleanor smiled faintly. Yes, I was. Walter looked around the table. For 35 years, people walked past my name because another name was printed larger. A plaque will not change those years. No, Eleanor said. It will not. My wife will not see it. No. My son may never believe I became the man I once was. Eleanor waited. Walter's voice grew quieter. I do not want to be turned into a story about a forgotten genius who was discovered by wealthy people. I was not invisible because no one could see me. I was invisible because most people decided I had nothing useful to say. Lena felt the truth of those words fill the room. Walter continued. If you want to recognize what happened, begin with the loading dock. Eleanor frowned slightly. What do you mean? Your building has heat in every hallway. Food is discarded after every executive event. Empty offices remain warm through the night. Yet people sleep against the outside wall because the door between abundance and need is controlled by policy. No one interrupted him. Create a winter warming room, Walter said. Partner with veterans organizations and local shelters. Hire trained outreach workers. Do not make custodians break rules to keep people alive. Eleanor nodded slowly. What else? Review your contract employees. Many work in this building every night and cannot afford proper health insurance. Lena looked at him. And Ms. Williams? Eleanor asked. Walter turned toward Lena. She should decide what she wants. People keep offering poor women gratitude when what they need is authority. For the first time that morning, Eleanor smiled fully. That may be the most accurate statement made in this room. The investigation that followed lasted 6 weeks. It uncovered years of deferred maintenance, incomplete safety records, and a culture in which contract workers were discouraged from reporting concerns directly. Dennis Cole resigned before the board completed its findings. No public humiliation followed. Lena did not celebrate his fall. She had seen enough of life to know that justice was not the same as revenge. She wanted the system repaired. Eleanor Grant invited Lena to participate in a new employee safety council. At first, Lena assumed the invitation was ceremonial. Then Eleanor asked a direct question. What would make this building safer for the people who work here at night? Lena arrived at the next meeting with 12 pages of notes. Better lighting at the service entrance. Reliable transportation vouchers during severe weather. A confidential reporting process for contract workers. Emergency meals and blankets. Paid safety training for cleaning staff. A policy allowing temporary shelter in designated areas during weather emergencies. And one heated room near the loading dock where outreach workers could meet individuals in crisis without shame. Eleanor read every page. 3 months later, North River Financial offered Lena a full-time position as Community and Night Operations Coordinator. The salary was nearly double what she had earned as a custodian. The job included health insurance, paid leave, and tuition support. Lena read the offer letter at her kitchen table. Caleb looked over her shoulder. Coordinator sounds important. It sounds like meetings. Meetings are where people decide things. Sometimes meetings are where people avoid deciding things. Then you should be there. Lena accepted. But she insisted that the building's cleaning staff receive wage reviews and access to the same emergency transportation program as direct employees. You negotiate like my grandmother, Eleanor told her. She worked in a laundry room. Then I wish she had served on my board. Walter accepted the consulting position. Before starting, he completed the paperwork required to restore his veterans' benefits. A caseworker helped him move into a small furnished apartment near Hyde Park. The apartment had one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a window facing a park. The first night, Walter slept in a chair. The bed was too quiet. The walls seemed too close. At 2 a.m, he walked outside and sat on the front steps until sunrise. The next day, he told Lena he might leave. She visited with Caleb and brought coffee. You said walls were harder than weather, she reminded him. They still are. Then we begin with one room. Walter looked around the apartment. How? Do not make it a home all at once. Make it a place where one thing belongs. Caleb placed the repaired radio on the windowsill. This belongs here. Lena brought Margaret's old coffee cup, which Walter had kept wrapped inside his canvas bag. She washed it and placed it beside the sink. This belongs here. Walter set his engineering books on a shelf. The next week, he added a lamp. Then a chair. Then a framed photograph of Margaret. He did not become comfortable immediately. Healing did not arrive like a door opening. It came like morning light, touching one object at a time. Walter began visiting Meridian Tower 3 days a week. He worked with Luis and the independent safety team to replace the generator intake, update electrical diagrams, uncover the original manual crossfeed, and train maintenance staff. He refused a private office. Instead, he used a desk in the engineering room. Young technicians gathered around him with questions. Walter answered patiently. Never trust a diagram more than the building, he told them. Why? One apprentice asked. Because drawings describe what people intended. Buildings remember what people actually did. A new set of emergency plans was created. At the bottom of every page appeared the names of all contributing engineers, past and present. Walter's name was not larger than the others. That was how he wanted it. The warming room opened before the end of winter. It was called the Open Door Center. Walter disliked the name at first. Sounds like a furniture store, he said. Lena laughed. What would you call it? A warm room. That lacks inspiration. It has accuracy. The room contained tables, lockers, charging outlets, first aid supplies, and a small kitchen. Outreach workers visited each evening. Local restaurants donated food that would otherwise have been discarded. No one was required to listen to a speech before receiving a meal. No one was photographed without permission. No one was called a success story for accepting help. Lena insisted on those rules. Dignity is not an extra service, she said. It is the first one. Some people came once. Others returned for weeks. Several veterans were connected with housing and benefits. A woman named Janice found part-time work in the building cafeteria. An older man named Henry reunited with his sister after 11 years. Not every story ended neatly. Some people refused assistance. Some returned to the street. Some disappeared. Lena learned that helping did not mean controlling the outcome. Kindness was not a bargain. Her mother had been right. In April, Meridian Tower held a small ceremony in the lobby. Eleanor unveiled a bronze plaque near the elevators. It did not call Walter a hero. At his request, it read, "The emergency safety systems of Meridian Tower were strengthened by engineers, technicians, firefighters, security officers, cleaners, and workers whose knowledge and courage protected others during the winter storm of January 14th. Below the message were several names: Walter Hayes, Luis Alvarez, Lena Williams, the responding fire crew, the night security team. Walter stood beside Lena during the ceremony. He wore a dark suit that fit properly now. His hair had been trimmed. He still carried the old canvas bag sometimes, though he no longer needed to. Caleb leaned close to him. You said you did not want a plaque. I lost the argument. Do you like it? Walter considered the question. I like that there are many names. After the ceremony, a reporter approached Walter. Mr. Hayes, how does it feel to finally receive recognition? Walter looked toward the service entrance. Recognition is useful if it opens a door for someone else. The reporter waited for a more dramatic answer. Walter had none. That evening, the news report aired across Chicago. A photograph of Walter appeared on screen. His full name was spoken. 2,000 miles away, in Portland, Oregon, Thomas Hayes watched the report in his living room. He had not seen his father in 4 years. Thomas was 42, married, with a 10-year-old daughter named Emily. For years he had searched shelters, contacted hospitals, and called old acquaintances. Then he stopped. Not because he no longer cared, because hope had become painful. When Walter's face appeared on television, Thomas dropped the glass he was holding. The next morning, Meridian Tower received a call. Lena was in the open door center when Eleanor came to find her. There is someone trying to reach Walter. Who? His son. Lena closed her eyes. Does Walter know? Not yet. They found him in the engineering room explaining a ventilation diagram to 2 apprentices. When Eleanor told him, Walter sat down. For several moments he did not speak. Did he leave a number? He asked. Yes. Walter looked at the telephone, then at Lena. I do not know what to say. Say hello. He has every reason to be angry. Then let him be angry. I failed him. Then do not begin with an excuse. Walter picked up the phone. His hand trembled. He dialed. Thomas answered on the first ring. Neither man spoke. Finally, Walter said, Hello, son. Thomas breathed in sharply. Dad? Yes. Are you safe? Walter looked around the engineering room. Lena, Eleanor, and the apprentices had quietly stepped away. Yes, he said. I am safe. Thomas began to cry. Walter closed his eyes. I am sorry, he whispered. The conversation lasted 23 minutes. It did not repair 4 years. It did something more honest. It found the broken connection. Thomas visited Chicago in May. He brought Emily. Walter waited at the airport wearing the gray scarf Lena had given him. When Thomas appeared, father and son stopped several feet apart. Thomas had Margaret's eyes. Walter looked older than the man Thomas remembered. For a moment, neither moved. Then Emily walked forward. Are you Grandpa Walter? Walter knelt slowly. Yes. My dad says you can fix anything. Walter looked at Thomas. Thomas's face tightened with emotion. Walter turned back to Emily. Your father remembers too kindly. Emily opened her backpack and pulled out a broken music box. Can you fix this? Walter took it in both hands. I can try. Thomas stepped closer. That is all I wanted you to say years ago. Walter stood. I know. They embraced. It was not a perfect reunion. There were difficult conversations. Thomas spoke about anger, worry, and the years of unanswered calls. Walter listened. He did not defend himself. He did not ask sorrow to excuse what it had caused. He simply said, You deserved a father who answered. Thomas replied, I still want the father who is here. They began again. Lena watched Walter's life return in ordinary pieces. A family photograph on his desk, a plane ticket to Portland, a child's drawing taped to his refrigerator, 5 Sunday phone calls, plans made more than a week in advance. He still had difficult nights. He still woke expecting the ceiling of a shelter or the open sky. He still carried crackers in his coat pocket out of habit, but he no longer walked away when people cared for him. That required a different kind of courage. Lena's life changed too. Her new salary allowed her to replace the failing radiator in the apartment and buy Caleb a proper desk. She paid off an old medical bill left from Daniel's illness. She opened a savings account for Caleb's education. But she remained in the same neighborhood. She continued taking the bus most days, even after buying a used car, because she said the bus reminded her who the city belonged to. At work, she attended meetings with executives who once passed her without seeing her. Some adjusted quickly. Others needed time. Lena never tried to imitate them. She spoke plainly. She asked who would be affected. She asked who had not been invited into the room. She asked whether a policy looked as reasonable from the loading dock as it did from the boardroom. At first, people called her perspective refreshing. Later, when her questions became expensive, they called her persistent. Eleanor Grant called her necessary. One afternoon, nearly a year after the storm, Lena found Dennis Cole standing outside the Open Door Center. He wore a brown coat and looked older. He had found work managing a smaller property in another part of the city. The investigation had damaged his career, but had not destroyed it. Lena approached carefully. "Can I help you?" Dennis looked through the glass at the warm room. Several people sat at tables drinking coffee. Walter was showing a young veteran how to complete an online benefits form. "I came to see it," Dennis said. "Why?" "I heard the program is expanding." "It is." He nodded. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Dennis said, "I was wrong that night." Lena waited. "I believed control was the same as safety. It is not. I know that now." She studied him. Apologies were easy when they asked nothing from the person receiving them. Dennis continued. "I told myself I was protecting the building, the budget, the company, but mostly, I was protecting the belief that I was the most qualified person in every room." Lena glanced toward Walter. What changed? Dennis followed her eyes. "The building failed. He understood it. You understood him. I understood neither." Lena did not offer forgiveness immediately. She did not owe him comfort, but she recognized truth. "What will you do differently?" she asked. "My new building has no cold weather policy for people outside." "Then write one." "I am." "Include the night staff." "I will." "Pay them for training." Dennis almost smiled. "You still negotiate like an advocate." "I learned from people who could not afford not to." He turned to leave. "Lena?" "Yes?" "I am sorry I took your job." She looked through the glass at the center, then toward the elevators, where her name appeared on the safety plaque. "You took the position I had," she said. "You did not take the work I was meant to do." Dennis nodded once and walked away. Lena did not know whether he would truly change, but she hoped he would, not because he deserved an easy ending. Because every repaired person made the world safer for someone else. That winter, another storm moved toward Chicago. Forecasts warned of heavy snow and dangerous temperatures. This time, Meridian Tower prepared early. The generator intake was inspected. Emergency supplies were checked. Transportation vouchers were distributed to night employees. The Open Door Center extended its hours. No email reminded staff that appearances must be maintained. Instead, Eleanor sent one message to every employee and contractor in the building. No one is to be left outside in dangerous weather. Use judgment. Protect life first. Reports can be written afterward. Lena printed the email and taped it beside the service entrance. Walter read it twice. "Policies can learn," he said, "only when people teach them." By evening, snow had begun falling. The city softened beneath white streets and blurred lights. Inside the Open Door Center, volunteers served soup. Caleb, now 14, repaired phone chargers at a small table. He had grown several inches and wore the brass screwdriver in a loop on his belt. Walter sat beside him. "Do not force the screw," he advised. "I am not forcing it. You are negotiating aggressively." Caleb laughed. Lena stood near the doorway watching them. On the wall behind her hung the wooden sign from her kitchen. "Kindness is never wasted." She had moved it to the center after finding a new sign for the apartment. The new one read, "A home is any place where no one is treated as invisible." A young woman entered from the storm, carrying a sleeping child. Her coat was wet. Fear filled her eyes. "I was told we could come here," she said. Lena stepped forward. "You were told correctly. I do not have identification. That can wait. I cannot pay." "There is nothing to pay." The woman began to cry. Lena took the child gently and led them toward the warm room. Walter watched from across the center. Their eyes met. Neither needed to speak. A year earlier, he had stood outside a locked door believing the world had finished with him. Now he held a ring of keys to the building. Not because a wealthy company had rescued him. Not because a plaque had restored his worth. His worth had never left. One person had simply refused to look away long enough for others to see it. Later that night, when the last bowls had been washed and the storm had quieted, Walter and Lena stood beside the loading dock. Snow covered the place where he once slept. The old awning remained, but beneath it now stood a weatherproof cabinet containing blankets, gloves, hand warmers, and information about available shelters. Walter touched the brick wall. "I used to count these stones," he said. "Why? It gave my mind something to do. How many are there?" 248 between the door and the corner. Lena smiled. "You counted often?" "Yes." He looked through the service door at the warm light beyond it. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had walked past me that first night?" Lena considered the question. "You would have survived. Perhaps. You had survived many nights before me." Walter nodded. "But I think surviving had become the only thing you expected." "That is true. My mother used to say people can become accustomed to almost anything, even being forgotten. What did she say we should do about it? Remember them out loud." Walter looked toward the city. Cars moved slowly through plowed streets. Windows glowed in apartment buildings. Somewhere, a train sounded along the river. "Lena?" "Yes? Thank you for remembering me out loud." She placed one hand on his arm. "Thank you for listening when the building spoke." He smiled. The service door opened behind them. Caleb leaned outside. "Mom, Mr. Hayes, the soup is getting cold." Walter looked at Lena. "Your son still dislikes green beans?" "With great discipline. A tactical mistake." They went inside. The door closed against the winter wind. Years later, people would tell the story in different ways. Some would say it was about a homeless veteran who saved 37 executives. Some would say it was about an overlooked engineer whose name was restored. Some would say it was about a single mother who risked her job to help a stranger. All of those versions were true, but they were incomplete. The real story was not about one night. It was about every small decision that came before it. A cup of coffee offered without judgment. A sandwich left where pride would not be wounded. A broken radio repaired by a boy. A door opened during a storm. A worker who spoke when silence would have been safer. An old man who remembered the system everyone else had forgotten. A board chair willing to admit what her institution had done. A son who answered the telephone. A building that learned the value of the people standing in its shadows. No single act created the ending. Kindness rarely works that way. It travels quietly from hand to hand. It waits inside ordinary choices. It repairs connections no one else can see. And sometimes, on the coldest night of the year, it becomes the light that keeps an entire building from going dark.